I sat down with Alexis Cox to talk about the upcoming Sarpa Yoga, the transits of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, the Sun in this current age. You'll really like this, so check it out. Hey folks, I'm here with my good friend and astrologer, Alexis Cox, and she's going to be talking about the Sarpa Yoga. We're going to be talking about this current Sarpa Yoga that's happening as I record this in end of March 2020, and we're going to talk about the lunar nodes in this axis, the history of the nodes, and all kinds of great stuff. So happy to have you, Alexis. Welcome.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Tell us a little bit about yourself again. Alexis, I know you go by the spiritual name Radha, and you're also an astrologer. Just catch us up, because you were on the channel before, people really liked it, and have people, remember your story and know about your practice that you're doing.
Sure. I'm a yoga teacher and a student of Sam's, an astrologer. I do a lot of work with the mythology and integrating the different sciences. So I like to bring together the astrology into my yoga classes. I like to bring mythology into the yoga classes. And I like to really help people understand the deeper meaning behind these practices, not just the physical aspect. So that's a big part of what I do and how I teach people or, elucidate what we're learning here. So.
And your website and Radha Home Yoga?
Is radhahomeyoga.com. Yes, exactly.
Radha Home Yoga. Great. Wonderful. So what do we got today? What are we going to, how are we going to approach the nodes?
Where are we going in? Well, the nodes are, as we know, just a very mysterious and sneaky subject. So we're going to just dive in, I guess. The Sarpa Yoga that is currently going on in the sky is really best understood when we talk about the nodes themselves. So we are going to start off just by explaining the nodes and what they're doing here. I love to always tell a story. That's the best way to have people take in information and really let it meet them on every different level, not just on the intellectual plane. So I was going to share the story of the nodes and how they came into being. Because they started really as just one node, started with Rahu. And Rahu was at the great churning of the Milky Way, that all the devas, all the gods, and all the asuras, all the demons were at. And they were having the goal of getting the Amrita, the immortal nectar, out of this pot, out of this Milky Way that they were stirring. But of course, before that Amrita would come up, there was lots of other things that came as well. And so the gods heard from Vishnu that it would be better for them to take the back end of the snake that they were using. They were using the snake Vasuki for the stirring rod. And the Asuras were thinking greedily that they would be able to go closer and get the Amrita first. To understand the Asuras and the Devas, also just to take it one step back, is these are demons and gods in terms of our interpretation of them. But it's not so simple as just, bad and good. It's more like of the earthly plane, the material plane, wanting desire, wanting pleasure, having greedy thoughts, which we all have. Yeah. What did you say?
I said lustful.
Lust.
Yeah.
Exactly. All these human wants that we have and desires that we have, as opposed to the devas who are often reaching for those higher spiritual principles and separating themselves from these, human nature things
or animalistic, or more like the animalistic part.
Right, the animalistic part of the human brain
of humans. Humans are kind of the way I see it, just my view is like human is like in between. It's like there's the animalistic part of the human, and then there's the deva part of the human, and we're kind of mediating.
We're doing both, right? Exactly.
And that's really what that story is illustrating, like in the mind, the churning of the milk ocean, which, as you said, was the Milky Way, symbolized as it's literally like the Milky Way, but they called it the milk ocean. But it was that internal struggle. We can see it on a psychological, intellectual level between our animalistic tendencies and our divine qualities. That's really the Suras and the Devas, as you said.
And we're not, very few beings are all one or the other. We're all various places on that scale.
At different times, at different times. And that's really what the nodes show. They show the animal poking its head up and going, "Arr," and the human trying to say, okay, but there's a divine quality to this animalistic urge.
Right. There's something we can reach, and that's going to be important as we go further into this in terms of what we can do or how we can mitigate this this current alignment. So we
So in the story,
back to
yeah,
the
you were
story,
saying,
so that the Devas knew that before anything positive was going to come up out of this, there was going to be first the hala hala poison, and that was going to come up first. So they had that foresight, and of course the poison came up. Shiva took it into his throat, became the blue-throated one, and eventually other things started to come out, including the goddess Lakshmi, including
Dhanvantari for Ayurveda. All of the great teachings, all the great wisdom traditions came out after all the poison.
And then finally the Amrita, which is what they were looking for, the immortal elixir, this nectar that was going to make them all immortal. And so they were all lined up waiting for their portion. And Vishnu decided to disguise himself as Mohini, this beautiful, sensual woman. And he went around doling out the Amrita, but he wanted to only give it to the Devas. And he figured that by being so sensuous, he would be able to allure the Asuras into thinking they were also receiving it without actually giving it to them. So
it's almost like their Amrita was to gaze upon Mohini.
Exactly. Well, because they're so stuck in that desire state, they could only see what was in front of them, and they didn't pay attention to the fact that they weren't getting the sweet nectar. And so in the meantime, Rahu, in Rahu's way, slithers in and sneaks between the sun and the moon and pretends to be a Deva. And Mohini goes around and gives the Devas their Amrita, including Rahu. Well, the sun and the moon figure this out, and they go and tell Vishnu, hey, that was an Asura in disguise. And Vishnu immediately throws his sun chakra and cuts Rahu in half. But of course, he'd already digested the Amrita. And so then Rahu becomes this 2 parts, but immortal. And the top half is Rahu, and it has just the mouth, just the head, just the gaping, insatiable heart that is wanting to constantly consume and take in and get more. But there's no body, there's no digestive tract, there's nothing to actually assimilate what's being taken in. So it's just this sort of obsessive quality. And the southern half, the lower half, is Ketu, which is just the body and the tail with no head, nothing to engage in this world.
Yeah, like the head, like a headless body.
A headless body. And there's no interest with a headless body. Without a head, we're not speaking, we're not looking, we're not interested. There's no engagement. And it's just this part that already has been there, has already seen and already digested everything, and isn't taking in anything new. And so this is kind of, this story is important because it shows a lot of different aspects of the notes, the secretive quality, the fact that there's this elusive quality, and the fact that they would, be able to hide themselves, because one of the qualities of the nodes is that they're very much take on the personality of whatever planets they're joined or are in whatever sign they're in. So you see that they don't really have their own identity as strongly as the other grahas, as the other planetary beings. And the nodes are also really important to understand that they're not bodies. So all the other grahas, which is the planets that are grabbing us, and the luminaries, the sun and the moon, are physical bodies that we're looking at. But the nodes are just mathematically figured out spaces and in time and space where the eclipses will occur, when the sun and moon are full and new in those places. So
if I can add a little bit.
By all means,
yeah, and absolutely fantastic. Yeah, that's really the way to see them too. And it's literally like what happened too in the story is that since the nodes were clever enough to get the drink, they became immortal as well. So there was nothing that could happen. Right. Once the Swarbanu was the name of the Asura, and then once it went into his mouth, Vishnu cut the head off, but it was still immortal, and he had to honor that it was immortal. So he had to give them their immortal place, and he gave them their immortal place in the sky. And cutting them, the thing that cuts them, literally, Vishnu's Sudarshan chakra is literally the ecliptic. It's the ecliptic that cuts them. So one is north of the ecliptic, one is south of the ecliptic. So even that thing that cuts the node is literally the ecliptic. It's not just part of the
Right.
story.
Not just,
It's
yeah.
literally astronomical. It's the north and the south. No, it's north and south of the ecliptic. One is this way, one is that way. And they they're, as you said, they're actually the energetic, it's really an energetic um, point that exists between, it's the energetic converging point of the sun, moon, and earth. So where the orbits of the sun, moon, and earth line up energetically, there is a point where they're always lining up energetically, but everything hasn't yet lined up at that point. So we don't see the nodes often, but we do see them when all three of those points do eventually converge. We see them when we have eclipses. That's when we see them. Then they disappear. They're still there because that energetic point is always there. So when we're looking at the nodes, that's actually what we're looking at. We're looking at the north and the south energetic converging point of the orbits of the sun, moon, and earth, because they're moving independent of each other, but miraculously those three bodies converge literally, architecturally, and structurally a couple times a year. But even when they're not in that converging point, the energetic convergence point is always there.
Up there. Yeah.
So I just wanted to add, to fill
Yeah,
that
no,
in
that's beautiful.
a
I
more,
appreciate
yeah,
that.
as a more astronomical, astrological thing. And the way I look at it, last thing, is that it's kind of like a magnetic field. Like, we don't see the magnetic field, but we see its effect. So Rahu and Ketu, again, like you say, the magnetic field in and of itself doesn't necessarily have a lot of properties except for its capacity to magnetize and polarize in some level. And Rahu and Ketu do have their own quality in the way that they distort the reality around them.
For sure.
But they're only going to distort the things around them relative to what gets near them. So the further you are from the field or whatever, if you're not joined it, then you're not in that distortion field. But
Right.
just like a magnetic field, we don't see it until we put something near it, until another magnet gets near it or a piece of metal, then you see its effect. So even though they're not visible most of the time, they are visible once in a while when we have eclipses. So they're not invisible, they're just usually not visible. They show and then they disappear, and their influence, they do have their own nature to influence, but mainly based on whatever they're influencing. So they're going to mainly have those qualities based on the sign they're in, the house they're in from a natal chart if you're doing the natal astrology, and any planets that they join. Then they're going to bring their nature to their sort of distortion field in that way. So I just wanted to
Yeah, for sure. And I wasn't saying that they weren't visible. I was just saying that they weren't bodies, that they
I
weren't
wasn't correcting you. I didn't know whether you said it or not. I'm talking about most others people's preconceptions. They're like, oh, they're invisible. I didn't say you said it, but
okay, I get it.
I'm just saying a few misconceptions
No,
here.
I like that. I like that concept of the magnetic as well, because it is that they have this magnetic quality for us, and that's part of why they drive our karma so strongly. And
it's very interesting to even ponder the fact is because we think they're invisible most of the time, but even this is a realization that I came to even not that long ago. It's like, because I've said many times, oh, they're invisible, they're invisible. Actually, they're not. They're mostly invisible, but they show up. They show up very regularly. We can predict when we're going to see them. So they're usually not visible, but we can predict when they're gonna when we're gonna see it, and then they make their appearance. That's why anything that's a real singularity like that is very attention getting, because they usually don't see them and then they show up. So this is why they're so powerful, because they're showing up when the orbits of the sun, moon, and earth show up together. Everything has to align and then we see them. Anyway, go ahead.
And the to further on the story from that, the moon and the sun are said to always, or there's basically, they say Rahu and Ketu are always chasing the moon and the sun for telling on them. And this is why, this is how you can see that they're eclipsing most often the moon and sun. What we see in the new moon is that it's a solar eclipse. We see in the full moon, it's a lunar eclipse. But with this particular alignment that we're talking about today with the Kala Sarpa Yoga, they're not actually eclipsing the moon and the sun, and they're not next to any of the bodies. It's actually that they're all between the two nodes. All the planets are between the two nodes. And so I know we're going to talk a little bit more about where the nodes are actually in the sky right now, but I just wanted to speak that Kala Sarpa Yoga, what
Do you have the chart so we can just see what the chart looks like now? Just to sort of foreshadow?
For sure. So I have the chart for when it actually started, if you count by the degrees of when the planets all got inside of it.
Yeah, let's see
And
it.
then, yeah, let me,
Yeah, just so we can look at the visual too, and we can have it up
sure,
as well while we're talking.
while
It's
we're
good to have it
talking.
up there. Yeah,
Okay.
and
So this is the one that shows really where it began in terms of degrees, in terms of Mars crossing over Ketu, and us having all the planets in the right degrees so that Ketu and Rahu are on the outside of it. So you see, we begin with Rahu, and here I can sort of spotlight it. We have Rahu up here, and the nodes move backwards. So these are the planets all between them. And this one, of course, shows Ketu at the top, but that's not the degrees. The degrees are down here where we have Ketu
yeah,
at 1204, and then Mars was the last one to cross into 13. Jupiter was already at 2449, so Jupiter was already well out of the sphere. So that's technically a month ago is when we actually had this Kalasarpa yoga begin.
by exact degrees. Yeah,
By exact degrees, exactly. And some people do say that it doesn't really start until the planets are all out of the sign itself, and the two nodes are in their own signs. So that's the other chart I brought up was actually what's going to be in 2 days when Jupiter
yeah.
officially moves into Capricorn. Would you prefer if I have that one up,
Oh, it
or
doesn't matter.
yeah?
It's important to look at, but I
Mhm.
usually, personally, I usually don't consider it until I usually do it by Rashi. Just my
By
own.
Ra- Okay.
There is no right or
Yeah.
wrong because it's a very
Exactly.
subtle thing.
There really isn't. I think it's the importance of when it specifically in this time. I think that we can see at the end of February there was a lot that started.
Yeah,
So just like you were saying before, and I know you're going to talk about this a little bit more, how really this all started when the nodes moved into the axis of Gemini Sagittarius in many ways. This Kalasarpa starts when the degrees pass and you start to
yeah,
see that things started to get really diluted, things started to
yeah.
become really blown up at the end of February.
Yeah,
Because
it's
2 weeks into
legitimate
March,
both ways for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. So I felt like that was a good timing for this to start it. But for sure, the most powerful part is coming in the next couple of days here as Jupiter moves into Capricorn.
Yeah.
We'll see it officially have a much bigger jump.
And so just to delineate, I just like to bring things into an explanation rather than often astrologers will be like, well, I consider it when it does this and I consider it when it does that. Let's,
Right.
Rather than that part, because then it's just a contest of some sort, which doesn't matter. It's better to just explain why or what the differences are. And the reason I don't usually consider that it's necessarily Kalasarpa until the Rashi's changes, because like when you looked at the other chart, because one of them I'm considering what's more important is that you have Jupiter and Mars joined Ketu. So again, this is going to have more of an impact. To me, the nodal
Mm,
axis has so much more impact when it's joined one of the Rashis or two of the Rashis. So what I'm saying is that I consider, especially like, for example, nodes aspecting each other or something like, I wouldn't consider Rahu was aspecting Jupiter and Mars. It would, you could say Rashi aspect because the dual signs Rashi aspect each other. But the point is that rather than considering that those degrees were creating a Kala Sarpa yoga, I would focus a lot more on the fact that Ketu is joined, that Jupiter and Mars are in conjunction with Ketu,
I
Ketu.
yeah,
To me, that's much more prominent than the fact, because interpreting the Kala Sarpa yoga, it's a much more nuanced interpretation. Because
mm,
when you're interpreting the Kala Sarpa yoga, you're interpreting that section of the zodiac. You're considering all of the planets within that, and again, that's much more of a nuanced interpretation.
for sure.
But when you have planets joined one of the nodes, it's not. It's much more immediate. And so
Right.
again, I would
I
say
think
that
there's that impact of Mars and K2 being so close was the more prominent thing at that time than
yeah,
starting at the.
that the thing that was really showing the interpretation and the kind of blow up, the sort of conflagration and the conflation of, oh my God, now, oh boy, everything's about to blow up, was the fact that you had K2 Mars with, K2 Mars Jupiter in Sagittarius.
Hmm.
not so much that it was Kala Sarpa Yoga. This is the
Right.
difference in the interpretation. So again, it's totally legitimate
Yeah.
either way, both ways. But that's the subtlety in the interpretation, and that's why I generally, through my experience, have seen that usually when you have that, they have to clear that node before I'm really focusing a lot on the Kala Sarpa. Before that, I'm focusing more on the conjunction with whatever node is there, and seeing that as being the big like bam thing. So I think
Right.
with that in mind, just to say that I think we're going to see a shift actually from what has been happening since that time. Perhaps this is my feeling about it, and we can look at it. But what was set off at that time when we had Mars, Jupiter, Ketu, and Sagittarius, that actually, let's look at it and see. But that part of it is now going to pass, and now it's going to be more of a Kala Sarpa interpretation. This is how I would read it.
I
That
see.
now,
Yeah.
that now we're getting into a pure Kala Sarpa interpretation because we don't have the node actually distorting the planet due to the Rashi. So
Right. I get that. I don't know if you want to go into Rahu and Ketu a little bit, just where they're at right now, or if we want to continue this. But the way that this particular Kalasarpa is working, for for people who might not know, is that Rahu is leading this Kalasarpa because the planets are between Rahu and Ketu this way, and the nodes, like I said earlier, move backwards.
so
So
explain that. Yeah, yeah.
what what came to me when you were just speaking, because I totally agree with what you were saying, is that there was this sort of explosive energy that happened at the end of February because Ketu, Mars, and Jupiter were all joined, and especially Ketu and Mars. You see that sort of the militants and these kind of things coming out.
Bring that chart up again since we're talking about it.
Okay. Um, the the part that I wanted to say though is that when we see Mars, Ketu, Jupiter, what we're starting with here, the reason why I was starting with the Kalasarpa and the degrees is because the energetic of Rahu and Gemini, which is really this a very different energy than Ketu in Sagittarius. Rahu is outgoing in the world. It's out in the world, like we said. It's this big mouth just out devouring whatever it can. In the sign of Gemini, which is information and facts and communication, that part where we started to explode with information, something that had been fairly not as much of a big deal, at least here in the US. We hadn't been talking about it on this level. This coronavirus, of course, is what I'm talking about. The media was covering it on some level that it was happening in these other places, but the explosion of it really coming home to us and being something that people were talking about really came out at this time at the end of February, and we saw this sort of explosion of information. So while there was the other end of it, for sure, that Mars, Ketu, Jupiter happening, creating the issue, making it that much more severe at that time. The part of the Kalasarpa that I believe sort of began at that time was the information, the part where information really just became everywhere and anything. I mean, everywhere you look, there's a million different people who have opinions, who have facts that are not facts, because the whole thing with the nodes is that there's a lot of delusion involved. There's not a lot of reality. The material world, the practical world, does not function as well with the nodal energy. The nodal energy is much more of this sort of otherworldly quality that can bring us great spiritual gains if we're tuning in on that level. But when we're tuning in on this very practical plane of facts and figures and how many people have this and what's happening in this country and what's happening in this country and what all these sort of ways in which we have to deal with this through the media, through the hospitals, through practical action, through laws, through each individual person and the choices they're making, companies closing down, all of that stuff, that the nodes have more of a distortion on that kind of world. And it's harder to make choices coming from facts and figures when they're all diluted and there's so much information everywhere. It's just all over the place. And no one really knows too much of the truth. I mean, at least in this country, the data just on how many cases there are is completely
Well, yeah,
you know.
and just to say, and that's totally legit to even to read that as Kala Sarpa Yoga. That's why I also, I'm not so I don't have really hard opinions about these
Yeah.
things. I talk about my process in it, but it's totally legitimate also to say, oh yeah, this was shown more of a kind of reality distortion field based on the Rahu end of the Gemini, that all of a sudden we were flooded with all this information. That's perfectly legitimate way to read that as well. And by the way, it's not only, I'll just say this because we're talking also about the shift in the world that happened since around the end of February and our response to the coronavirus. It wasn't just in the US as well. Again, it's not to correct you or anything like that, but it was even around the world, because even Italy and these other places hadn't really taken it as seriously. Some of the Asian countries did. We thought it might be something in Asia or China, South Korea. You had Asia was still worried. It might get to the West, the US, who knows? It's just kind of something happening. No, after that, we started seeing it exploding in Italy. And then it was like, Christ, now this is everywhere.
Right.
And so it could certainly be interpreted as well as being a Kala Sarpa with Rahu at the head in Gemini, in case people didn't get that it's Rahu leading it. And the reason is because the nodes move backwards. Because you see, with any Kala Sarpa, the planets are in between the two nodes, but you see which one is leading it based on the motion of the nodes. Don't forget the nodes move backwards. So Rahu is moving towards Taurus, and that's where all the planets are. They're in between those two. If they would have been on the other side, then they would have been moving toward Ketu, or I'm sorry, Ketu would be leading it. So,
and it would be a very different situation.
Yeah. So that interpretation is really valid, and a continuation of what Rahu and Gemini has been doing, because Rahu, by the way, is also always the leading edge of the node anyway. When I do my nodal updates, anytime the nodes shift, Rahu is always the leading end of the node, because it's what's getting pushed, what's evolving, what's developing. And so since March, the end of March 2019, when Rahu went into Gemini, we've been in that information trying to get the truth since then. The truth will be revealed, which is the biggest thing I've been saying since the end of March of last year, because that's when Rahu went into Gemini.
Right.
And since then, I talked immediately, if we want to, just very quick history lesson, right after Rahu went into Gemini in 2019, literally, right as it was happening here in the US, we had that Mueller report was finally brought out, and then we saw the propaganda around that. For example, again, we'll see the truth. We'll see what they've been doing. And then, again, from there, we went to different kinds of things to use the political sphere. We wound up with impeachment. As soon as Jupiter then went into Sagittarius, Jupiter had been in Scorpio while Rahu was in Gemini. As soon as Jupiter went into Sagittarius and Rahu was still in Gemini, that's when we had all the impeachment stuff. Again, Jupiter is justice, so Jupiter went into Sagittarius while Rahu was still in Gemini. So again, Rahu in Gemini is bringing out the truth. You're going to see the facts. You're going to see the truth. And you're going to see the truth about how the political leaders react and how the people react and all of this stuff. You're going to get all the information and the propaganda and be able to see through it, hopefully, and be able to question your biases and all this stuff.
That would be the one thing I would add to that. We're going to see the truth, but we're also going to see a lot of lies.
But that's the truth. Yeah. But I want to take this to a meta level, because people are people think that, oh, we're going to see the truth, so Trump should go to jail, or the CIA will be exposed, or Hillary will be, or it's not your version of the truth. The truth is we live in an age of propaganda. The truth is we're still going to see it all. We're going to see that the Democrats want to impeach, and the Republicans, no matter what, they're not going to do it. And the culture is going to react this way. No matter what, this is what we got, and we're going to see it. And we didn't know before that. Remember, we'll rewind it back. We didn't know what was going to happen. What's going to happen when Mueller report comes out, for example, in the politics? What's going to happen if he gets impeached? We don't know. Well, now we know. Now we see a meta truth, not the truth you want or I want. And by the way, I was saying that the whole time. We're going to see the meta truth, which is this is the system. And the truth we need to see is that, which is the truth I've always been saying, even though people hate me because I criticize Trump. I've always been saying he's just a symptom. I'm not a fan of any of them. It's the system we have. So again, on a political level and a global level, that's the truth that we're seeing, not the truth we want or I want or that we think is right. So we also have to introspect about that, because if we're on team Democrat or team Republican, we're part of this. We're buying into a system. So that's the meta truth. just
and
to,
the truth is that
yeah,
most people are still in that place of maybe not necessarily the Democrats or Republicans, but whatever they believe very strongly, they're still kind of just now starting to question perhaps or see a little past the do you want to
yes.
say
Oh,
yes
no, no, go ahead.
yeah,
No, I'm
no,
going,
but that, the
I'm giving you
cheerleading,
the,
yeah, that like cheerleading for something or another is still happening, but you can see people starting to like have different overlaps of what they believe, and it's starting to become a little bit more clear that there is no right side, and that there is no specific media that we can trust, or there is nothing that's actually coming out that's so particularly honest or truthful. So
and
the
guess what's really bringing it home?
what?
This crisis, this is
Yes,
all
totally.
happening within Rahu in Gemini, Ketu in Sagittarius. It's part of the same
Right.
transit because we were still, look at where we were 2 months ago. It was still, Trump saying fake news, the Dems are this or that, this or that, this or that. And what happened 2 weeks later, a month later? Republicans and Democrats come together, put all that crap aside, take this gigantic $2 trillion, and what did they do? They gave it to us. They gave it back to the people. They first tried to pass some business thing, and
Right.
and it didn't really
Yeah.
fly. So what we're seeing, what we need to be seeing is what I'm saying here, and not just in the US, but all around the world.
Right.
The problem is these systems that have taken all the money. Again, there's other systems. This is a political problem, but even the other global systems that we have, like our diet and our transportation, all these other things. But we're seeing that we're in an unsustainable system of
Yeah.
living on this earth. And the politics is just a part of it. And this is what this larger structure of this nodal axis through this crisis is about. That's why I wanted to talk with you. This is the part that I
100.
wanted to get in there, is that we
Yeah.
have to see it in a larger context that actually started last year when we started to see the truth. This is a meta truth,
Hmm.
that it's not just, oh, if Trump would just get impeached, then everything would be fine.
Right.
Bullshit.
And
Excuse me,
that's what
but
they've been,
yeah,
and that's the line they've been feeding us. And even now, I mean, I know you said that they just passed this $1 trillion deal to give money back to the people, but most people don't feel like, it's really sufficient what's actually being given to the people
that's
themselves.
right. That's right.
We're still seeing this truth play out again and again. They're congratulating themselves, patting themselves on the back for, costing each one of us whatever $18,000 and giving us back 1,200.
Right.
We're at the point now where people, even people who might not be that spiritually inclined or might not be that aware and not awake to all this stuff, because some of us might have been seeing this for a long time, that this was a trend, but even people who haven't been that awake are waking up now because their lives have been shook, because they've lost their jobs, because they're suddenly home with their families and actually spending time with them instead of just spending all their time on a 3-hour commute to and from their job, or because they're the fact they can only go to nature. They can't do anything else, so they have to go appreciate nature because they can't go all the many other places they thought were so important before. So
Yeah, what you
we're in
just said
time.
is totally
Yeah.
true, though, about even though we see this attempt, again, we see the structure, like let's say the government attempting to rush in there and try to hold it all together and give us some of the crumbs. But again, it's not going to be adequate. No one is cheerleading, but we still see the attempt, and we still see how this system is so broken, and that getting rid of one party or getting rid of this isn't going to solve it. You can just replace it with another cutout, or you could replace it with Jesus himself. And in this system, he would get ground to a halt because the system is so corrupt.
It's
So,
so
so I just wanted to put that in a larger context, that where we're at right now with any Kala Sarpa or anything, you have to go back to when the nodes first went there. And then you can trace some of the transits, especially the transits of course, Jupiter and Saturn, because these are the 3 or 4 main shifts all the time. You got to look, where's the nodal axis, where's Jupiter, where's Saturn, and then we see a shift. We were in we were in this Jupiter axis in this nodal axis as soon as Saturn went into Capricorn. Boom,
right.
all kinds of stuff. This is actually when we really started to see the seriousness, not just of this, but of other situations in the world. And then, again, so it's all in a context. So
Yeah.
this is
I'm
great
gonna bring that.
yeah,
I'm gonna bring that Jupiter one back up again so that we
yeah.
can
And
see that.
so the last thing that I'll say, and then I'll stop and let you go again, but then it's back to you again. But the last thing that I wanted to say to put this in
Yeah.
context is that we can maybe observe this Kala Sarpa Yoga shift. And again, it's very legitimate what you also said about part of the information. Like we can really see that the disturbance, once globally we realized that we did have this serious virus unleashed on us, was very much a Rahu at the head of a Kala Sarpa Yoga, very much so. But what's going to happen now, and we can observe a different quality of it now that we're not going to have Ketu that we're not going to have Jupiter and Mars with Ketu getting really distorted. It's now going to shift, and we're going to have these planets in Capricorn, and it's going to be a full Kala Sarpa where there are no planets joined any node. It's going to bring a different quality to it now.
Right, 100%, because when it is joined, like you were saying, it's more similar to the way the moon or the sun is affected when it's joined the node. There's this complete eclipsing of the normal energy of the planet and its capacity to operate the way it normally does. And what the Kala Sarpa is doing instead, and just, I don't know if we actually said this, but Kala is time and Sarpa is the serpent. And so
Right.
it's the yoga is bringing together, it's the joining, the union of the two ends of the snake. And they're holding us in its grasp or in its.
By the way,
coil.
like I said before we started, I need to take a drink of blood at some point.
Sam brought his Rahu juice to the table.
This is what sustains me in social distancing, is a little blood. So continue.
You can't get the flesh. You gotta go for the beet juice. So we see just in a couple of days here, Jupiter is going to be moving into Capricorn, and we're like Sam just said, we're going to see that the two nodes are by themselves now, and they're, instead of joining the different planetary energies, they're now holding them all in the grasp. And it's a delusional quality that every planet will have placed upon it in a way. We're all going to be in all different aspects of ourself, whether our relational self, our capacity to communicate, our higher self consciousness, all of it is trapped in this sort of Kala Sarpa Yoga. And I know that it's not a necessarily something that's in the ancient texts, this yoga, but it's been interpreted more and more in recent years. People have seen
it was in the medieval text. It wasn't in Parashara, but it's a legitimate configuration. I believe it was Paladipika, and some later texts as well did mention it. It's a legitimate configuration for sure. It wasn't in Parashara, but Parashara ignored the nodes largely. And this is one very quick aside, is in Parashara, he doesn't really talk about them much at all. And this is why he says a few things about them. And so that makes it also very significant, kind of like the nodes themselves. They're not everywhere. But so when he does say something, it's very significant. He includes them. He includes them in the planetary cabinet. He tells you how they form Raja Yogas. He doesn't say anything about them casting aspects, nothing like that. So when he does mention it, it's very significant. But one of the things is that in later texts, particularly Paladipika, has a lot of very interesting things about the nodes. And those texts were actually written by the astrologers of their day. Paladipika, Jataka Parijata, even the works of Varahamihira, they were like practicing astrologers, whereas Parashara was a rishi. So it's a different thing. So there are different levels. They were kind of like for example, Mantreshwara, who wrote Paladipika, was kind of like one of us. He was like an astrologer of the day looking at all these charts. So his observations are kind of very direct, and also based on, he was an Indian who understood all that mythology. So there's some very fascinating things that are said in those medieval texts and those Middle Age texts that aren't in Parashara. So it's a very legitimate thing to look at. I'm not a purist in that regard. I look at what works, and I've definitely seen where it's very significant in that regard, I think.
And like we're saying that the planets are all in between these two, but Rahu's leading this energetic, where we're taking this mass influx of information that's just coming out of every pore right now, and we're moving it towards the assimilation and the capacity to form something that's a valid belief out of it all. So that's kind of the direction that it's going, and how it's holding these different planets. But like we said, the nodes are very mysterious and very they can offer us great insight into our spiritual selves and into ourselves beyond this sort of physical world, but they create a lot of confusion and delusion in the regular world. So we're going to see that all these planets are going to be affected, And whatever axis this is for you, whatever, houses Gemini and Sagittarius are for you, are also going to be in your own personal life greatly affected, just as they have been with this nodal axis to begin with. And so when Jupiter moves into into Capricorn, we're seeing that, Mars and Saturn. I know Sam has a really great video on Mars and Saturn in Capricorn, so I won't talk too much about that. You can go look that up and see a little bit more. But essentially, Mars is exalted here in Capricorn, and our capacity to be strong, our capacity to act courageously and with discipline is very supported with this alignment. We see there's a clear path of something that has an end that we can commit to, that has practical results and is going to provide us with safety and security, and our sense of action can work towards that. With Saturn in its
Great
own sign.
Explanation. There you go. No, that's great.
I learned from the best.
No, well, but there's your words.
Yeah.
I never said it like that before. That was absolutely well said. Everybody should write that down.
I think of Mars in Capricorn in that way because it's a couple years ago when Mars was in Capricorn with joined Ketu, I was in Hawaii and the lava was flowing, and I could see when it moved in, it had a path, like the lava was going somewhere specific. It had a goal and it was going there, and all of our lives didn't really matter.
Yeah, people should know. People should know about Alexis. Years ago, a couple of years ago, when we had that Mars Ketu, Mars was exalted in Capricorn and joined Ketu for 5 months or something, and Alexis lived in Hawaii, and while all the volcanic eruptions was like. I remember I was like, how are you doing? And you're like, well, the lava's only, 500 yards away. So we're hanging in there. I'm like, get the hell out. She's like,
yeah, we're on the run with the dogs. Yeah, no, it was
just like,
it was intense.
I can't believe like so much courage. I mean, you have so much courage, like living near a live volcano while the lava is encroaching.
Well, it's funny because that has a lot to do with what we were just talking about. I knew a long time ago that the system wasn't working.
Yeah.
So I moved to live off grid because I knew this was a faulty foundation we were working with. So now here I am back again. Right when the SHIT hits the fan, I'm back here in civilization.
Yeah.
But that Saturn also is very intelligent here in this alignment, really offering us the capacity to be humble, to use our fear and to use our awareness of time in service of a goal, a specific practical goal that will have our needs met. And those two energies are going to work very well towards people taking practical action here in the midst of this pandemic, doing the things that need to be done, whether it is preparing your own house and your own family for their needs to be met, but also on a governmental scale and everything else, taking those bigger steps that we need to take so that we can all be secure in this time. But when Jupiter moves in, it's an interesting new step in it, because Jupiter is not exalted in Capricorn. Jupiter is debilitated, and we see that our capacity to have these belief systems and ideals and inspirations that are expansive and that are connected to positive teachings, to true teachings, really, is going to be constricted. And we're going to have a much more fear-based ideology leading us through this. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. Nothing in the Vedic sciences is about being bad or good. It's just a different energy. It's not being connected on this really high spiritual plane. It's being connected on a more practical, even miserly. For Jupiter, who's usually very generous and offers us this expansive quality, there's a tendency to just be more constricted and more fearful in what is leading us to make our physical choices that we'll be making using this Mars and Saturn. And like Sam said earlier, Jupiter's also the government. Jupiter it's law. It's not police officers. It's not the actual enforcement of law, but it's the laws, it's the government, and it's going to be bringing that into the picture, for better or for worse, depending on, everyone has different views on what they want the government's role in everything to be, but there will be more of a role of the government in this situation.
And the thing, just if I can say, because we always have to not leave out, of course, when we look at dignity, in any sense, especially when we see something that's debilitated, we're like, and as you mentioned, yes, it's going to show where our teachings, where the inspiration that we get from our teachings is much harder to come by, particularly because it was just in Sagittarius. This is one of the biggest transitions.
It'll be like a
Sagittarius. Now it's kind of like a cold bucket of water over our head, literally, and faced with all of our fears. So again, it's great. We have all these ideas that inspire us. Now connect this with all of your fears and your fear of death. Okay. Now you have all these ideas. Now you're going to die. So now how much of those teachings do you remember? So that's the kind of default stance.
Right.
But we can never forget Neecha Bhanga, because it's the
That's
most
what I was going to say.
thing.
I was going to say, that was where I was going with that for sure. Because
well, then go with it, because I'll just say that the thing that's great is that if Jupiter's just in Capricorn and there's no Neecha Bhanga, particularly with the ruler or whatever, then we just get stuck in it. When the ruler is there, it props it up. So go ahead.
Exactly. And that's a really important thing to understand. And it's actually two Neecha Bhanga, really, because we have both the exalted planet,
the two most powerful.
And so it's, and eventually even three. So what we have is, for those of you who don't know what Neecha Bhanga is, it's when a debilitated planet has certain things that help it. It doesn't reverse it. It doesn't make it undebilitated. It doesn't suddenly give Jupiter a ton of wisdom. What it does is offer a helping hand. So that disciplined action that Mars is going to be so capable of, that showing up every day in courage just to do what needs to be done. And that part of Saturn that's really able to find the higher part of Saturn, which beyond the fear is really solitude and peace and a lack of attachment to the fact that we are actually going to die, whether we die this week or next week, or whether we die of coronavirus or old age or whatever we die of. In fact, I've actually personally and through other people seen quite a number of people die from natural or other things other than coronavirus in the last few weeks. Death is imminent, and those two energies, Mars and Saturn, are offering Jupiter a helping hand, allowing us to sort of evolve our philosophies and our beliefs and ideals to be not high in the way Jupiter is normally high, but through the action, through the daily discipline, through this sort of, solitude and capacity to have peace with whatever will be, Jupiter our part of us that is inspired and that needs to have these solid beliefs will feel more pacified by that, and we won't feel as constricted. We'll be able to expand just simply through those actions that Saturn and Mars are bringing. And so that's, it's an important thing to get, because Jupiter leading the way can also be, even if it's in Sagittarius, can be problematic too. People can be too caught up in their beliefs, too caught up in their ideals, and not have enough practical action on the ground floor. So it's, it's bringing.
Excuse me. Yeah. Just real quick. Yeah. What you said is exactly right. And this is going to be a very powerful Neecha Bhanga Raja Yoga for like half of the people in the world. Like if you're an Aries person, if you're a Taurus person, this is literally a Neecha Bhanga Raja Yoga by transit.
Right.
Because again, you're getting angle and trine lords joined in an angle, again, because one of them is debilitated, but one of them is exalted and one of them is the ruler. So again, there's no more powerful Neecha Bhanga than either join the ruler or join an exalted planet. Here it's both. So again, It doesn't take away what Jupiter is going to be, lacking, you might say, but knowing it going in is like, okay, well, now I still have my teachings. It's not like the teachings go, it's just the inspirational feeling and the hope that goes along with it might be harder to come by, but then you get the hope through some kind of action, putting your beliefs into action, which is Mars, will resurrect the hope, and concentrating and being focused on it, which is Saturn, will also restore your faith. So again, this is how the Neecha Bhanga works. So, but it's still going to be there for sure. And you can see how, especially with this virus thing, we're going to see people working hard, because it's also Capricorn, busting their tail. But through it all, we're going to have hope, and we're going to be inspired by this effort and hard work. It's the simplest explanation.
By the humility, by the hard work.
Being
and I'm going to go
ahead.
I was going to just share, move that into the next part of it, what's going to happen next, which is that we have the sun going into Aries at, in April
In middle of
14th.
April, yeah.
So not only do we have Mars exalted, is that right? Oh yeah, the moon is there too then. So not only do we have Mars exalted in Capricorn, we have the sun moving into its exaltation point as well in Aries. And so our capacity to connect through that light of the sun, that consciousness that we have, our power, our sense of our own personal sense of power within ourselves is also going to be elevated, and we're going to have that courage that we need. The ruler of Aries is Mars, so the ruler of the sun will be also exalted. We have this powerful, really our masculine energy and very powerful placement, helping us lead the way through to see truth and to actually have clear, disciplined action and courageous action right now. So
there's also some great
be
hemming on that sun. I just want to point out the hemming between Mercury and Venus. The sun is hemmed, which is also great.
Through these, and so that, well, that was the other part of it I was going to talk about, not the hemming, but the fact that we then do have Mercury, of course. So Venus and Mercury move about the same time as the sun, and we see Venus has moved into her own sign there, and actually she moved a little bit before that. But Venus has been in Aries, and I know Sam's also talked about this a lot recently, but she's going to be moving into Taurus, and we're going to see ourselves relating a little more peacefully, because recently, there's been a lot of volatile attacks, not really necessarily even directed at the people who are in charge and are causing, whatever distress we have, but at one another. You see people just really hating on each other for having different opinions than them, or for having a different belief. And it's all coming from, like we said, this sort of mismatch of information, none of which is really all that true. And people are just taking it out on each other. Their anger, their fear, all these different things are coming out at one another. So when Venus is in her own sign of Taurus, we'll start to see a lot more peace and harmony, and a desire to get our needs met, which is really the big thing with Taurus that's different from when Venus is in Libra, is you see a focus on food and maybe planting food and creating comfort and saying, yes, I want you to eat, and I want to eat also, and I want the food to taste good. I don't want it to suck. Like, I want to feel good. I want to have pleasure. I want to have beauty around me, and I want to feel secure, but not just in this sort of Capricorn fearful way, but in a beautiful way, in a way that actually feels good.
Yeah.
So we, that also coming into play. So we're going to have Venus and Saturn in their own signs, Mars and the sun in their, state of exaltation. And then Mercury, of course, will be right there moving into its highest state of debilitation as well. So we have Mercury and Jupiter, sort of our buddhi, our discrimination, our capacity to really discern the information coming at us, maybe also a little bit challenged.
Yeah.
Since Jupiter.
Yeah, definitely. The two debilitated planets. Again, Jupiter has the Neecha Bhanga, but Mercury, this could be a time, and this is still happening within this Pisces cycle. I just did a new moon in Pisces update where I talked about how this next 30 days, which just started a couple days ago, is going to be, this is a Pisces time. Pisces is about all of the fantasies, illusions, projection. The whole concept of projection that people talk about is literally Pisces. We literally project our beliefs onto other people. What we believe about something, we project onto other people. We're all projecting constantly. People believe things about me and about you, and it comes from them, not from you. You might cooperate a little bit, but it's their projection and our projection. So the one thing I talked about too, and this is important because of the Mercury in Pisces, is we can lose our discrimination and not realize that we're projecting. Again, when Mercury is powerful, we can think like, okay, maybe this is just my projection and it's just kind of spinning out, but I still have some intelligence and discrimination behind the projection. So with Mercury debilitated, we might lose ourselves in our projections, but it's really time to examine what are our projections, because people who already have a kind of belief about the world that's hopeful and inspired, you're seeing them now project that hopeful, look, I think it's going to work out. It's going to be hard, but I think we're going to get through it. I see the positive in it. On the other side of this, we'll all be able to telecommute more. Maybe we'll start treating the world better, the earth better. We're going to learn something. There's something on the other side of this. Those who have these dark fantasies about the nature of the world and existence is it's just our overlords. It was cooked up in a lab as a weapon. They're just setting us up to all get vaxxed and microchipped, and it's the reptiles taking over. And all. Again, I'm not trying to make light of the fact that there are sinister forces in the world. Of course they are. Of course they are. But what we're seeing in this Pisces era right now, even in this cycle, is examine what do you really believe about the world right now? Because you're projecting that, and that's going to have so much to do with how you get through this and how you get through everything. Because notice the people that always have those negative, dark projections, they always have them. It doesn't matter what it is. Obama was going to put us in FEMA camps. Everything Obama did was going to put us in FEMA camps.
No, it's true. And it's the information.
It's their projection.
And it's the information, and especially in this day and age, they can choose more of that information as well.
You can find what you're looking for.
It gets created, and it's really, it's a matter of, you could turn your TV up. I don't personally have a TV, so I don't have the news on 24/7. So I'm not constantly being inundated with whatever that perspective is. I have to go out and find it on the internet. But of course, I choose things that resonate with me on some level, as do most of us. We're seeing more of whatever we want to see or we believe. And like Sam said, this is really this new moon is also a lot about surrender. So that was a big part of how I focused on it in my new moon report was that concept of surrender, because people have been sort of railing against this and really needing it their way, and this is what's going to happen, I have to do this. And now people are kind of, there's a lot less fight in people. Whatever action they're taking is more in that practical realm of Capricorn that we're talking about.
And we realize now, again, because we had the previous cycle that all blew up in Aquarius. In the Aquarius cycle, where it was like, we're all in it together.
Nonetheless.
Yeah, and this was a thing where I was like, we're all in it together. We all need each other. It shows how we're all and now it's set in motion a kind of gravity and a kind of inertia, where now the solution is, okay, now go home and be quiet and go off by yourself. It's like, okay, like we have that's also very Pisces, which is by yourself in your own world. And what are you doing when you're alone? So again, when you're by yourself and you're alone and you have nothing else to do, now you're the source of all of it. Now you just are projecting everything. Right. So again, this is very Piscean now. This is why we're in this Pisces cycle where, okay, now we're not in it all together, so let's get together and do something. It's like, okay, now even that's not working. Now go home. Go home.
And some people will go home and watch movies that are violent or whatever, and some people will go home and watch, happy love stories, and some people will go home and not watch anything and do spiritual practices.
Right.
So we're all at a different point in the continuum on this, and that's going to be really important in this entire period of time. In this Kala Sarpa Yoga, we have to worry about getting too caught up in the mundane details. The surrender that Pisces can teach us on a higher level, there's of course high levels of escapism and all of this possible, but on the higher levels, when people have more evolution, they're able to surrender in a way that isn't escaping as much as it is allowing life to just be what it is, and recognize that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over it. You could be right, you could be wrong, it could be a conspiracy, it could not be a conspiracy, but what are you going to do about it? Not too much, especially now that you're stuck at home. What you're going to do about it is evolve your own self and allow whatever you want to see out in the world be what you're reflecting within your own self and your own practice, your own consciousness.
Yeah.
And your own mind.
And I just mentioned that with the Mercury because, that the Mercury in Pisces is that we're in this Pisces time now. So when Mercury enters Pisces, that'll be a time when we might get into that sort of daydreaming and kind of lose a little bit of discrimination, because Mercury's been in Aquarius the whole time, and he goes into Pisces on April 7th. I'm pulling up the chart now. So April 7th, Mercury goes into Pisces, but he goes through very fast. He's only there for like 17 days. April 24th, he goes into Aries. So he goes through it pretty quick. But for those couple weeks, it's like 17 days. We can get into that kind of like, but look for examine your projections right now for the next month.
Well,
suffice to say.
Yeah. And spend that time escaping into something that's positive, at least allow it to be something that's going to, escape into your mantra, escape into your divine pool of.
Yeah, that's always my thing is like, we're either escaping from we're either escaping from the false reality into ourself or escaping from ourself into the false reality.
That's so true. So
These
true.
are the two fish, and we go back and forth. We're kind of doing both. Now I'm escaping into my reality. Now I'm escaping from it, and kind of, so how we spend our time alone is so important right now because we're being forced to spend time alone. Saturn in Capricorn really delivered the goods this time.
Yeah.
It's like,
it sure did, man. It was
go
like,
home.
it was like the mean uncle for sure.
He's
but
like,
it's you
go
know,
ahead.
It's really important that we understand that last part you just said. I think is the most important thing for this the whole reason I actually wanted to talk about Sarpa Yoga was for that, because I think it's just like in an eclipse. If you're driving around and doing errands when an eclipse is happening, everything's going to kind of go awry. You're going to run into things aren't going to really work out. You're going to be confused and deluded, and everything's going to be this mess. If you sit in meditation during that period of time, or you're somewhere in nature and solitude and allowing yourself to receive, I mean, amazing things have happened to me during eclipses. I've had incredible insight into things, and powerful, transcendent experiences have occurred. So if you're in a place of receptivity, which Pisces does offer, and this this new moon cycle offers us, if we are in that place and able to just sort of be, then we're going to be more likely to receive the brilliant nuggets of wisdom from the other side than we are if we're kind of trying to live in this really superficial world that we're more and more seeing the face of crumble apart, or more and more seeing the ways in which it's it's not even real. It's just this crazy construct. In Sanskrit, it's the Maya, it's the illusion, and we're all living in it, right? And it's becoming apparent even to those who are not really particularly spiritual or evolved or interested even in any of that, because they can't avoid it anymore, because the illusion that they've been grouping onto is literally falling apart before their very eyes. So it's a powerful way to access this time, instead of it just being more confusion, more delusion, more more hate and all this stuff. It's a time when we really have a powerful plan. I mean, even out of, like you said, only one of the planets that's debilitated is just straight debilitated. The other one is in a powerful Neecha Bhanga yoga.
Well, so and its ruler is debilitated. So Mercury is pretty crucial, because he's pretty upset here because he's debilitated, and so is his ruler.
That's a good point. And it's also our discrimination, which right now, considering we're in again, and Rahu being the node that's moving this whole Kala Sarpa, Rahu's being ruled by Mercury. So the facts and information themselves, that's why I was quick to jump on when you said that the truth will be revealed, because the facts and information themselves right now are so faulty that we're in a situation where maybe you and I are really able to see that and see beyond that. But I think there's still a long way to go for many, many people, as far as recognizing how much untruth there really is, and how much the junk is inundating their brain.
Well, we can see this and we can be very intentional and prove it right now. Now we can talk about it in a very abstract way, like the information that's coming to us from the government and all on that level, absolutely as well, propaganda and all. But we can also see just very literally, even with this virus, the biggest problem that's even going on with the virus is literally,
don't know how many people
is a literal exact showing of exactly what you're saying. The biggest problem, the reason we all have to stay home, is no one knows who has it. We don't know if we have it or not. We don't even know how contagious it is. We don't know how many people have it. We don't really know so well how it's we don't know anything about it.
Yeah, we don't know anything.
That's the reason why. So instead of wondering, it's like, okay, because we're not sure, stay home, everybody. It's like the most severe.
It's guaranteed that the information we're getting is not true, because nobody knows. Like you said, that we literally have no idea how many.
We have no idea. It's novel, and its potential is so, potentially catastrophic, that the best thing we could come up with is, all right, everybody go home and stop being human beings for a while. Stop being this rapacious, virulent organism on the earth for a while. And it's really, if we're smart, we'll actually also go, maybe the virus is us. Maybe the fact that human beings now have a timeout and we have to go home and go in our rooms and not go out and have fun with each other the way we have fun. Let's get on our planes and fly all over the place and use all the Earth's resources and do all the stuff that human beings to have fun with. The mean uncle is saying, go home, kids. You're killing this place. This place can't take much more of your fun. This Earth is not your fun house. And really, like, the best way to do it is to say, there's this thing that could kill you all, but we're not really sure what to do except to have you all go home. This could kill all of you, and we're not really sure how it works, but the only thing we can come up with is go home and stop doing what you go home. It's like perfect.
Totally.
And really the origin of it, you know, Malini and I talked about it, and I talked about it, all Vedic astrologers did, really, even though we didn't say it's going to be a virus, is that eclipse and that December 25th eclipse. You get all these planets in Mullah. It was like Kali just said, okay, enough, man. Bam! I'm going to blow this shit. I'm going to make the perfect scenario. And I'm not going to kill you all. I could kill you all right now if I wanted, in any number of ways, but I'm not. I'm going to unleash something that's going to show you guys what you're doing, and I'm going to make you all stay in your rooms for a while.
Chaos, and start from the beginning.
I'm going to put you in a timeout and let you see what's going on, and then let's see what happens. Because this is what I said from the beginning too, is that it's going to be very intense for a while, but then it's going to abate. Next year is going to be hard because Jupiter is going through Capricorn the whole time, and we also have other things going on in the world that, you know, we still are going to have a wildfire season, hurricane season. We still live in this Earth. Coronavirus didn't stop everything else that's going on. Those are the things I'm also really concerned about. So we got some stuff going.
And that's really the biggest thing, that we're never out of it. You know, we're never completely out of it. Right now it's bad. You have to stay home, wait until you don't have your house anymore because, you know, you couldn't pay your mortgage, or because there's a wildfire and you have to evacuate your home in the middle of a quarantine.
Or there's lava in some people's, there's lava.
Exactly. But, you know, and those things happen to specific people. So it was always like this region is having a problem, but now we have this sort of world problem that everyone's having. There's nowhere you can go to get away from it. And I think the only thing you can do is go within. The only thing you can do is to correct your own perceptions. If you know, if we're ever going to have any hope for the rest of the world, we have to start with ourselves. So the one last chart I wanted to, I was going to show when this thing ended, but I wanted to show the chart of right before this Kalasarpa ends, we have our planets going retrograde. And I say our planets because we have 3 of them going retrograde.
Yeah.
We have Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus all going retrograde. And this is, you know, literally like 2 weeks before the Kalasarpa Yoga ends, before Mercury crosses over Rahu, and sort of our discrimination finally in Gemini kind of gets out, you know, starts to break free of this snake holding us. And Venus going retrograde and Saturn going retrograde are both the planets in their own signs. So we see that intelligence that we were talking about, where they're really operating, you know, at full capacity, and our, you know, ability to harmonize and get along with each other, our ability to make things nice and beautiful. And then also with Saturn, our ability to act humbly and dutifully in the direction of something, and also perhaps surrender some of our fear in the face of the fact that we will indeed die. That kind of energy is going to start to be delayed and internalized and less proactive in the outside world. So rather than being so functioning outside in the world, we're going to have to start to dial in on the inside how we really feel about those things. You know, what did we really commit to? What action did we really set ourselves up in? You know, was it the right path to take? Was this really what we should be humbling ourselves in service of? And with Venus, you know, am I in the right relationship? No, going back to, you know, old relationships, and also just questioning whether or not that harmonizing was for the better. You know, making peace on the front end, maybe stuffed away things that needed to be dealt with, or whatever else can come up for us when Venus is retrograde. So we see both of those planets starting to move and it's really just back to back to back. I mean, it's like the 12th, 13th, 14th, where we see these planets go retrograde. They just one after the next, slow down, and from our perspective here on Earth, you know, start to move backwards. Jupiter is the one where it's adding to the Neecha Bhanga. With Jupiter being debilitated, being in a retrograde state is actually a little bit more of a positive thing, because
there you go.
allowing us to.
There you go. There's my girl. She knows. No, you're right. Yeah.
It's true, because when we have that sort of less intelligent energy, that slowing down allows us to really think about it and be like, oh, what was my belief system here? What I was from a kind of constrictive perspective, and maybe, and especially because it's going retrograde back towards Sagittarius, back towards its home court. We see ourselves starting to wonder if maybe we subscribe to it, even maybe some of the government things or things that we were agreeing to or feeling like we needed because of our safety and security. Maybe we're questioning that a little bit more and starting to come out of the delusion through a different kind of confusion, because retrograde planets do create confusion, but more in the outside world in terms of how the energy expresses itself. It really creates a time where we're internalizing the energy and focusing on it and thinking about it a little bit more. And maybe with Mercury, especially being the one to break the Kala Sarpa, I think we'll see our minds start to clear up a lot around this, and a lot more clarity in the midst of all the confusion, and a lot of questioning of some of the ways, some of the choices we've made to move through this.
Yeah. And even aside from this, it obviously, because this illness, this thing that's spreading is a kind of collective sort of global reference point, for lack of a better way to put it. And it's definitely a moment in time and in history that's arresting our attention as a species. And we can't ignore that as a kind of backdrop to what we're talking about. But, like you've also said, and like I've said as well, and I keep saying, this is, a great opportunity for humanity to come through things or to change and transform. But underneath it all, as individuals, it's even a greater opportunity to get serious about life and our true nature. And as you've said here many times so far today, just even those who didn't think they were spiritual or didn't have any interest in this, or I don't know, that's all just kind of whatever, people talk, new age stuff. This is going to change them. That's going to definitely change their understanding and their perspective, because I don't care who you are. Everybody is worried, and am I going to survive this? Everyone collectively on this earth facing their own fear of death and shaking them out of their delusion that they were in control of something that they are not in control of. That a month ago, nobody thought, well, it's this thing over in China. Oh, that's sad, but oh, well, I'm here, I'm there. No, it's right in your name. It could get you. And if this could get you, what else could get you? What about the next one? What about and that kind of awareness, we don't personally go back from that, even on a personal level, not just on a collective level. And so all of these planets in high dignity, especially the ones earlier, like we said, when we had, the sun also here and Mars also exalted, the stuff that we're living through right now as we record this at the end of March, these things are nothing but once in a lifetime opportunities to get the real pure spiritual power from not the planets, from our own consciousness, because that's what the planets are. And so this is with these retrogrades here, seeing them in their context and looking at, of course, one of the main things we always look at are the rulers, and all of the rulers are in their own signs.
Really.
So we still have all this rulership here that is so powerful. So Saturn going retrograde, ruling Jupiter that's retrograde. Again, it means we're going to be, this can be a time when I think, because this is by the middle of May, we're going to start seeing, I think, the most severe parts of this virus starting to wane. There could still be it's still going to be a lot of hard work finishing up and getting through it. And we can't be too impatient to rush back. Okay, now let's fire up the economy again and start, no, right. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't care what some of our stupid leaders say. We're not going to do it. Yeah. And again, they can't make us do anything. If I don't feel like leaving my house, I'm not going to leave my house.
Well, that's really what I'm seeing here more than anything, is that part of us with Mars moving on into Aquarius. I see a lot more some social uprising coming around at this time of questioning, like where we're moving out of that sort of just need to work in this direction, just need to do, just need to take these new laws, just need to make this happen. And I see people starting to get really upset and angry about the way things have gone, and the way the government's handled it, perhaps the way, maybe, again, we'll be questioning those good relations we were making, probably starting to run over whether or not we agree with our neighbors again. But this Mars in Aquarius is this sort of anger on a social level about the systems and how they're not working, and the frustration
Yeah.
around how we really did just get pennies tossed in our direction, and how the government really did a really crappy job. I mean, there were tests that were available that we could have, but instead we had to make our own tests, and they're not working. I mean, it's like kind of insane, actually, how poorly the powers that are handling things are handling things. And so and it's not a bipartisan thing, because I think everyone in office right now is not really doing that good of a job. I think it's
Well,
a
and I think even globally as well, where this is going to be a collective global. Again,
right.
this is all part of the same shift I'm talking about. There's going to be
yeah.
a reckoning that's going to happen, because but it's just showing what's always been there. And again, it goes back to the first thing I was talking about last year with Rahu going through Gemini. We're going to see the truth. We thought the truth was, if we could just get Trump out, or we could just get the Republicans out, or if it just wasn't for fake news, or whatever it is we were thinking.
Right.
The meta truth to all of that is that the whole thing is corrupt. It's based on levels of corruption, and the 1% of the 1% running everything. Most people aren't really that tuned into it. They might think it, but underneath it all, they're trying to work within that kind of paradigm, and also feeling powerless as a result. So this whole shift, and the thing that you're talking about, is a kind of collective frustration boiling over. I think it's going to, it'll also polarize things, that on a sort of mundane level, people are going to get back into their tribalism. I don't think that's going to change. I don't think, but I think there's going to be more of a common, if you might say, in a political sense, more of an independent third party kind of like, man, I'm ready to break all of it now. And more people just really rebelling against the system itself, rather than choosing a side in the game.
Exactly. And really realizing that we need to be leaders ourselves, really that part where we're individually not looking for someone to save us anymore, as much as each one of us has the capacity to make change and to lead some kind of helper. Or when you are in times of crisis, you often realize the people helping everyone are not, it's not these different organizations, it's not FEMA or the Red Cross, whatever. It's actually individuals helping each other that really help us get through. So that more grassroots citizen and world citizen action happening, and hopefully it will be, in terms of saving the planet and making more long-term sustainable choices, because this isn't working, and people were pacified. They were pacified by the fact that their life was working sort of well enough. They had enough food, they had enough this, they had their basic needs met, and they could just turn on their TV and ignore. But they can't ignore it anymore, right? So they're
and this plays into, again, what I was saying, and what I've been saying, not just me, but most astrologers. I've certainly been talking about a lot about how auspicious this time is right now. I'll have to say this, though, and it's not to take a shot at it. I won't name anyone, but some astrologers are just using this like they use a lot of things, to just spread gloom and doom around the world. And I don't see that at all. I don't see that. This Venus in Taurus, again, it goes in there actually the end of March, and it's there till early August. This is a long, auspicious transit. And this thing that you're talking about is people caring for each other, people seeing that it's us caring for each other that got us through. This is nothing but auspicious. You can't not see that transit is us coming together and returning to a greater common point of love and connection that's beyond politics and all this crap. I don't care who it is, Republican, Democrat, or who you are, or whatever party you are in any country. You don't want to see anybody dying, and you're furious that the ineptitudes and the problems with the systems are hurting Democrats or Republicans. We don't care at that point. And so the possibility that we're all going to wake up to a collective love and brotherhood with each other is so greatly enhanced with this Venus in Taurus for this long.
Yeah.
And the collective outrage will not be, most of it, I think, is we're going to come together. around all of those lines of division much more for each other, not against each other.
I agree.
And by the way, I've always felt, just the last thing really quick, I've always felt like it's been way overstated that anyone, that this country, I'll speak for the US, would ever engage in some kind of preposterous civil war over some stupid politician. It will not happen. We would need something so horrible. We would not, I don't think, ever take up arms because of some politician doing something. I don't think it would ever get to that point. I don't think that would ever happen. I think the ego of some politicians think that something like that might happen. It would never happen where we would start killing each other over something like that. I don't believe it.
That I think people only when their most basic needs are not met, and only when things are that serious. And I definitely mean the uprising in the most positive way, because I think
I didn't mean you.
Long due for that. We're long due for people to stand up and speak up, and also fight for their own and their, the collective's rights. So I think it's,
and I didn't mean that you said that. I didn't mean you said that, but we can get scared. And sometimes, again, I hear astrologers say these kinds of things, civil war and mass. This will never happen over some politician thing. That just wouldn't happen. We would come together before we would, or if any kind of things like that started, it would be very much outliers. It would be over basic necessities and needs. And we're all smart enough to know that it's not a Republican or a Democrat who's trying to kill you and take your food away and not give you enough. That's coming from a system, and the system will get changed. And
the system will get changed, I think, because people are, I think, just hearing that, that I don't think too many people really think of themselves as sort of this Democrat or Republican anymore. I think more and more we're global citizens, and the more that people can lead and hold teachings and be that sort of government type figure that people look up to help them, but instead of being a government elected official, just individual people who are standing up and helping, the more people will move in that direction. And
well, we have numbers and data even in that regard. I think it's something like 35% people consider themselves Democrat, about 32 Republican, and most of it is independent. And that's going to probably shrink even less, because we're going to realize that it's the corrupt system that has us all in thrall. Being on one team or the other, isn't the way to go. And this Kala Sarpa, again, within this construct of transforming society and seeing the truth of what's going on, is really doing its job. Having started in March, at the end of March 2019, and having all of these planets in high dignity while this was happening.
Yeah. With
Saturn moving into Capricorn, with Jupiter moving into Sagittarius, then all these exaltations with Mars also joining, this is what gigantic transformation looks like when all of these things start to pile up, because those nodes are also in very good dignity, and whatnot. And so anything else you wanted to say? I'm sure there's more, or a little bit more, or what?
I mean, that was kind of the final slide I was going to show, unless we wanted to just look at the very end. But the retrograde planets are pretty much coming to the end of the Kala Sarpa if you have Mercury, moving out. But I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I really think through the talking of it all, we discussed a lot of what I wanted to say was how we have a chance to evolve here. We have a chance to really move past the delusion, and the part of the nodes that is so secretive and is so sort of mischievous or hard to put a finger on is the part where we need to separate from just being so attached to knowing things, that like knowing the facts isn't going to get you that much closer to the truth in this particular case. Knowing if there's 5 deaths or 15 deaths or 500 deaths is not necessarily the most important thing right now. We are focusing on all these details and all this information, but the more and more we move through this next couple months, the more we'll start to focus on the parts that really matter, which is just, it doesn't even in the end matter how it started, or, if it's a conspiracy or if it's not a conspiracy. None of that really has too much to do with what action we need to take on the ground floor, what's being illuminated as wrong with our systems and our not just a government imposed systems, but our literal way of living. And it's not just in America, it's all around the world.
Yeah.
Even in places that used to have a more natural flow with using less resources and things like that, they've been moving in a capitalistic direction. I've traveled quite a lot. You go to these countries that, they're now littering and everything's now disposable for them too. And more and more our world has moved in this just really horrendous direction that we were maybe the leaders of in America, but everyone's sort of partaking in it now. So I think the more we can focus on that and healing what needs to be healed and helping one another, and the less we focus on the information that we're getting being right or wrong, because that information is really not going to be the truth is that it's not right. the truth is that the news isn't ever going to tell you what you need to know anymore. You need to look inside first of all. We need to have more introspection, and also just through this practical action on the ground floor it will illuminate itself just through the work.
And this is very much with Rahu in Gemini on the leading edge of what he's been doing since he entered Gemini, again, last year. And one of the things that I said, and that I saw this was going to be by the time we were done with it, is, again, Gemini is about speech, communication, and ultimately finding the right and having the proper discrimination to be able to see through things like spin and propaganda and using language and words and ideas to manipulate and coerce and conflate for corrupt motive. So when Gemini and Mercury energy is in deficit, the truth isn't being spoken. That's not even the goal. Information is used to confuse. Information is used as a device to accomplish a goal. So I say something to you so I can get what I want, not so I can speak truthfully. I'm not telling you the truth. The truth isn't even the point. It's not even the point. The point is, right. What do I want? What do I need to say to get what I want? That's what communication is. When it's done to coerce and to manipulate. You'll see it in someone's natal chart when Mercury is in detriment in one way or another, or when Mercury is harmed, they don't even know they're doing it. It's unconscious. They'll unconsciously use their words as a way to get what they want, not to speak the truth. And they don't understand how they can sabotage themselves, because then once you see that someone told you something that wasn't true, you don't trust them again, because now they're lying and they're manipulating you, and maybe they don't even know they're doing it, which is usually the case. But it's so different when someone's Mercury is powerful or Gemini is important and it's healthy. The person will say what's true, they'll speak what's true, and they'll recognize what's true. They'll notice, this is bullshit, this is truthful.
Right.
And with Rahu is going, here it is, throws it all up in the air and say, now you try to figure it out. Try to figure out what's real and what's not. Go ahead.
Exactly.
So it's more important than ever now, and it has been since the middle of last year or so, to look, because now we live in the age of spin and propaganda more than anything. It's propaganda. And it's not just in the government, it's in everything. It's in astrology. It's in everybody.
In marketing. It's marketing. It's all
everything.
It's all designed to, get from an emotional perspective. Yeah.
But and by the way, good marketing is actually just good information. And this is also why marketing now, this is a good example, because now that there's so much marketing, bad marketing doesn't work anymore. Because now bad marketing is being compared against good marketing, which is just good information. The best marketers now, the marketing revolution is actually, truth and wisdom and giving is the new marketing. And if you're just trying to say, buy my thing because it's so great, it reeks of insincerity now. Because we have good marketing now, which is not pushing at all. It's not push, it's pull, which means do something like what we're doing right now. What we're doing actually is good marketing. Guess what, folks? I just showed you the truth. I showed you the secret. No.
But I was thinking, I'm thinking more of like, large corporations that have these huge ad bills can do these super emotional videos on neighbors helping neighbors. And if you're using this thing, it comes off like, wow, you even cry. Maybe you watch this commercial and it's like so emotional. And at the end, what is this for? It's for some prescription drug, or it's from,
Right.
yeah.
But notice what they're doing is they're trying to give you something like,
Right.
but again, that's also one
Yeah.
way. It's very manipulative. So in that regard, but even that is dying because you see through it. You see through
Right.
it. But the best kind of marketing is actually just giving. Just give information. Just give good information, and then people will want more. It's called pull marketing, not push marketing.
Right.
Pull means you give, and then they want more.
Yeah.
And so again, besides that part of it, what we're seeing and what we're trying to filter through now is being bombarded with things that look true, and they're true enough to just maybe get past our filter, but deceptive enough to have an effect. And again, we see it everywhere. We see it again in astrology, in yoga, in new age, in spiritual stuff online. Everybody's an expert now. And it's very hard to distinguish between who is really an expert and who is close enough to where I can't really tell if what they're saying is true, but they really package it well, and they're nice looking and they're attractive, and they know how to say things in a way that makes me feel good about myself, or plays into some fear I have, or plays some angle that I like. Oh, he's a rebel. He's a this. I like that. I like that about him. And the things he says are close enough, or she says are close enough to what I already know, to where, again, we're seduced by the personality and the packaging and the presentation. The hell with the accuracy,
Right.
or with the veracity of what's being said. And so again, this is the age we live in now. It's the age of misinformation.
Right. And it's and too much of it. And if
Yeah.
we go to the other end of the node, the Ketu and Sagittarius part, I mean, the biggest part with Ketu is this sort of disinterest and a lack of wanting to deal with that area. But of course, it's something that it's still there. We need to work with it. And being in Sagittarius, we really see that the beliefs, people hold these strong beliefs, and it was more prominent when Saturn was joined, and
Right.
and even Mars, you could really see that the anger and the angst and all the militants and all this different stuff. But now we have to deal with that. The fact that our beliefs are faulty. There's something at the core. People just believe, well, I subscribe, even with yoga, or I believe in these Vedic principles, and so I'm right. I'm following good teachings, when in
Absolutely.
fact, you're not following them in a good way. Then you're not, if you're just subscribing to dogma and you don't integrate, and you don't actually have a truth at your center that you're coming from and that you're radiating everything else from, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what religion you choose, what ideology you choose, what words you use. It only matters where your center is, where your truth center is, and that's what the information is leading towards, right? And this whole thing where all the information has to be assimilated to mean something, and it has to mean something that comes from a really true place, not just, okay, these are the facts we have. Like a scientist might take all the different data that they have to construct the theory that was wanting to be proved from the get-go, or you can really come from the main goal just being truth. Just I want truth. I want to know what really is, and I want to radiate from that place. And it's not going to be a specific set of doctrines or anything else that's going to
And this was the other part of the node that I've been talking about as well. It's not just Rahu and Gemini showing us this and making us filter through, but it's opposite the Ketu and Sagittarius, which is our already previously held beliefs and dogmas, because whether we know it or not, we're dogmatic about the things we already believe. And again, you can use the political realm pretty easily because, again, I speak quite a bit about politics and whatnot, and people think they know my politics, or that I'm this one, or a liberal, or a Democrat, or this or that. And so, but one of the things that I've said is that all of that needs to be questioned. You're going to be questioning all of it at some point. Because even if you're maybe more on the liberal or progressive side, there's a downside to progressivism as well. Leftism and political correctness and all of this is one of the reasons why you have a Trump stand up, because there's also a downside to those kinds of things. The whole kind of whatever our previously held beliefs have been going into this are going to be shaken and shattered and challenged and tested. And we're going to see the visceral downside to that as well, whether we like it or not. Whatever our dogmas are, Ketu is locked into some belief and some ideology, and Rahu is going to show us the fault in that as well. And it's really like Ketu is the wisdom. I'm sorry, Sagittarius is like the wisdom that the lessons that we have really learned that have led to a certain amount of wisdom and belief, or at least a certain belief system. Some of it's wise, some of it's not. And Gemini is the sign that questions that and brings in a lot of new information and questions our teachings so that we can understand them through our own mind and be able to explain them. Being able to explain them is the real test of how much the things we believe are actually within our grasp or whether they're just dogmas. So if you ask someone to explain what they believe and they can't really give voice to it, then they don't really understand it. It's just a blind faith that they have in something.
I think that's Einstein's famous quote on that.
If you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it or something.
Yeah. If you can't explain something simply, then.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the blessings when we see Jupiter, the ruler of Ketu, being debilitated. And whenever we see planets that sort of go through these challenges, the energy is not as effortless anymore. And instead of just being expansive and hopeful and my beliefs are working, we're forced to put it on the ground floor and see how those beliefs play out. You might have thought, you might have this anti-big government view, and you might think everyone should be out there pioneering and the government's just trying to take my money and all this sort of stuff. And then you see the situation at hand and people are literally out of work and no one has any money and all this sort of stuff, and it's being tested on the ground floor. Maybe you, even as a small business owner, not you specifically, but like the person, this hypothetical person who I know many of, that sort of hate the idea of government infringing on their rights, but then their business is suffering.
Yeah, now give me money.
They can't pay their employees, and suddenly they're realizing the ways in which the system wasn't serving them either. So
one of the great examples of that, just real quick, is the politician Rand Paul. And Rand Paul is notorious. But Rand Paul, again, I'm not celebrating that he's got coronavirus, but Rand Paul is notorious for these libertarian values. Like, don't ask anything from the government. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. He's the one senator who voted against coronavirus funding. He's the one who said, no, you're not getting anything from the government for it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No. Bootstraps for everybody, which means don't ask anything from the government. Now, he's tested for coronavirus. It's like, okay, this is a great opportunity, Rand, for you to put that bootstrap theory into practice, because I'm sure you're not going to use your government-funded healthcare, government-funded all of this, because it's bootstraps, right? Well, it's bootstraps for the rest of us. And again, it's the one senator who is the most libertarian. It's called libertarian. Now, I have libertarian tendencies for sure. I think all of us do to some extent, to keep government out of your life as much as possible. But caring for its citizens, that's not the time to be libertarian, right? Because we have the money to provide healthcare for everybody. If we can spend hundreds of billions of dollars on the military anyway. So again, the karma and the irony of Rand Paul of all people.
It is very, very karmic.
Great opportunity to practice those bootstraps there. I'm sure you're not, though. I'm sure you didn't refuse the government-funded healthcare that you get. Bootstraps for the rest of us.
That we all pay, yeah. The ironies will come out and we'll all be slapped in the face with our version of it, with our strong beliefs that we held and how they will.
Well, I think this was a great talk, a great presentation. It's going to help a lot of people talking about how this Kala Sarpa Yoga, how this crisis, but also this great opportunity for us as individuals to really do our practices, to really get into the deeper levels of Saturn, all this Capricorn energy, this beautiful Venus energy. These are going to be the prominent themes for the next couple months. Within that, for a month and a half or so, we have Mars exalted as well. We're going to have the sun going through its exaltation. We had that great day of Akshaya Tritiya.
Oh yeah, that was actually I did have that too, but I think that'll be another story.
Yeah, that's the exact day, 23, 24, 25, when we also have sun and moon exalted, and also with Venus. So again, all of this auspicious energy that's happening, I don't know how Vedic astrologers aren't just jumping out of their skin like I've been about how, look, this is tough, but for a spiritual person, and especially if we're going into something like this, we couldn't have asked for more auspicious astrology for the next couple months. It almost couldn't be more auspicious.
Yeah.
To have all these planets in their own signs, exaltations, Venus once every, 20 years in Taurus for 4 months.
We'll all eat.
Yeah, and we'll take care of each other. We're going to take care of each
We'll
other. We're
take
going
care.
to see these higher powers. We're going to see how when pushed, when stressed like this, because they're stressed, we're all stressed, the best is going to come forth. The best is going to emerge. So all these gloom and doom of fantasy scenarios, I
Yeah.
haven't seen it happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be better than we think, even though it's horrible. And it's going to teach us something that we would have never been able to learn unless this happened, unless Kali said, okay, kids, go home and sit in your room for a while.
Yeah, it really, I mean, and the stressful energies are there to teach us something. That's when we evolve. That's when we get there. And Mars and Saturn and good dignity is great because instead of putting them on everyone else and disciplining everyone else and telling everyone else they need to do this, that, and the other, we're maybe going to put it on ourselves a little and
Love
point
it.
that finger inward. Yes. Well, thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah, let's have your information again,
Oh, sure.
Alexis. Yeah.
My website is www.radhahomeyoga.com. So RADHAYOGA, Radha Home Yoga. And I offer forecasts, every new and full moon, different special reports. And I've started doing online yoga classes recently with this switch. I had been focusing primarily on helping mothers do yoga at home, but now I'm sort of expanding that out to everyone. So I do meditations with storytelling and yoga classes, just asana classes as well. So.
And you also have, and I'll also put the links to your Instagram and your your Facebook as well, because there are people, and you also have YouTube channel, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll put all of those links there. Yeah, we'll put the links in the description because, again, you heard Alexis talking like this now when she has to deal with me interrupting or something. But she does these long uninterrupted. She does these long uninterrupted videos as well that you want to watch.
Sam keeps me grounded and always on my toes. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate what you brought here. This is very well discussed and presented, and it's time for us all to to remember, Rahu and Gemini is, keep it light. Don't be so stressed and worried. It's time. It's a beautiful time, really unprecedented. Even they talk about even the nodes are in great dignity now. All these planets are in fantastic dignity. This is why we're all waking up. We're all waking up together. The world is going to be better on the other side of this. We're going to get a lot of our time back. And it's a great opportunity to really connect with what, maybe we should have all been connecting with a little bit more. So it's all good.
And I really think that I want to reiterate this because you actually said it to me the other day too, but I really appreciate that idea you have that it's going to wake people up to moving out of the driving 3 hours to their cubicle every day, like realizing that you can work from home or realizing that you can have more flexibility and it was already happening for many people. A lot of mothers were, they were requiring different hours and stuff, but this opening for all of us, it's a chance that information that's going out to everyone, you're a part of it too. Each one of us, we can all put out our word more, move to different channels of operating. And that's
these things should have been happening years ago, right? With look at how many online universities right away they said, okay, don't come into the building anymore, just learn at home. And it had a couple bugs and little clunks here and there, but for the most part, it works. We have the technology. Why are we doing this anymore? Just wasting all the gas, the time. So many jobs now where you can just commute by video or work at home. And you can still come together once in a while, but you don't need to do that every day. It's a worn out paradigm that's unnecessary. And we're never going to be the same again after this. People should understand it's not going to just go back to the way it was in that regard.
No, because people now are not going to want to go back.
But I'm saying it's obvious at this point, right?
Yeah.
Well, then they're going to say, okay, now we don't have to worry. Let's all do this again. First of all, companies can save the money. They don't need these big buildings to pay this rent to these big buildings. The employees will be happier. Employees will be like, why do we have to do this? So it's going to transform the job market in a way that should have been happening anyway.
Yeah.
And this means we're going to get our time back. All that time people spend in these commutes every day, you don't need to do it. And that's just the beginning, so this is a great transformation for humanity right now. And we're in a scary part of it, but I
But
don't
the
think it's,
scary part's gonna only be so long. Yeah.
it'll
we
only
have-
be so long. We'll survive it, and we can see with the astrology, like we're talking about, all of this auspicious energy, this intensity right now, especially for the next month and a half. And then we'll start to get back to normal. We'll take care of each other. Life will go back, not just to the way it was, but better.
Yeah, better.
Better.
The new normal.
Well, thank you for doing your part in that. And it was great to talk. And people, look her up. She's a great resource, as you can see. Great updates where she speaks and really gives great advice. So look her up.
Have a good day. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.